Ahoy, hashtag Zach here. Today I'm going to update you on the situation in Ukraine over the past 48 hours, tell you about some of the things we can learn from this, and why, no, this does not guarantee World War III. First, I think I can speak for most Americans when I say to Ukrainians and any civilians affected by this in Eastern Europe, our prayers are with you. The history between Ukraine and Russia goes back hundreds, even thousands of years, and I believe I can oversimplify it by saying that they are two peoples with a lot of overlap in language and culture who have had a lot of interactions with each other throughout history, some peaceful, some productive, and some quite violent. The problems leading directly to the current situation now go back to 1991, when the Soviet Union dissolved, the government that had joined Russia and Ukraine for over half a century. In the time after this, Russia experienced some peaceful relations with Ukraine. However, once Putin took over and stated his dream of reuniting the Soviet Empire, Russia began occupying pieces of Ukraine, taking advantage of political and economic instability. This includes certain regions called Donetsk, Lublyansk, and the Crimea, all very industrialized and very strategic regions. Up till the past 48 hours, Russian and Ukrainian troops along the border was roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. No side had a massive superiority in numbers. Ukraine has received a lot of financial and military support from NATO countries, most especially the United States and Poland. The United States has also frequently threatened and employed economic sanctions against Russia, really hurting their economy. Over the past week, Russian President Vladimir Putin intentionally raised the tensions, sending over 100,000 extra soldiers along the Ukrainian border. This image shows hacked social media accounts of Russian soldiers, intel gained by the US government, displaying the massive concentration of different Soviet military groups along their border. Also, a fellow regime in Belarus to Ukraine's north allowed the placement of Russian soldiers. The war began on the night before Thursday, February 24th, 2022, when Russia began widespread bombing from planes and artillery pieces around Ukraine. This was targeted at the Ukrainian Air Force and air defenses so that Russia could gain complete superiority over the skies of Ukraine. This mission was as close to being a success as we could imagine, completely demolishing the Ukrainian Air Force and a lot of their anti-aircraft missiles. Around 56 were left dead, and around twice that number wounded. Russia got away with all of this damage, losing only 6 jets, 1 helicopter, and several crews of artillery. This map displays the major targets that the Russians attacked. The attacks were worse than this, however, as many civilians were caught in secondary explosions and stray rounds. It is unknown how many civilians died, but it is known that dozens of buildings, of apartments and houses were hit. Thursday morning saw the advances of Russian forces into the country, followed by a formal declaration of war by Vladimir Putin. The Russians also began attacking Ukraine from the sea and widening their bombing. This intensified bombing campaign saw civilians being the primary targets in order to dishearten the Ukrainian war effort. These actions were met by the Ukrainian government with heavy military resistance, the mobilizing of the entire Ukrainian military, plus reserves. Also, Ukraine enacted a curfew of 10 p.m. to prevent people from being on the streets if Russia launched more bombing during the night. Also, the United States declared that they would levy heavy economic sanctions, possibly even to the point of completely isolating the Russian economy from the world. Thursday night, Vladimir Putin attempted to justify the invasion by explaining Russia was intervening in Ukraine to prevent a fascist government from committing genocide. While it is unknown at this point how the Russian people have reacted to this, most of the international community has condemned this as being without evidence, and it is clearly made up. Putin also agreed to meet with the UN at some point in the next week, but still refuses to have direct talks with the Ukrainian government, which he calls illegitimate. He listed the purpose of the invasion as being to replace the Ukrainian government. Also overnight, he organized many night assaults on strategic locations across Ukraine against many strategic bridges, as well as the Chernobyl site. While he did seize the Chernobyl site while leaking minimal radiation from the former reactor, many of the bridge assaults were failures. Also overnight, Americans discovered that their attempts of restricting Russia were being subverted by three main countries: India, Turkey, and China. They have been using indirect economic and other means to boost Russia's war-making capabilities. Turkey has opened the Turkish Straits from the Mediterranean Sea to the Black Sea, allowing Russia to maneuver its military, really helping their military machine coordinate the invasion. India has allowed Russia to take out massive loans, as well as conducted major commerce with them, really buoying up the Russian economy in spite of the shutoff of much trade from Europe. Also, China has strengthened their economic ties with Russia. On the morning of Friday, February 25th, 2022, the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky addressed his nation and the world. He announced that his armed forces would be boosted by reservists and volunteers and conscripted soldiers to 1 million to get to a vast majority of soldiers that could push Russia out. This would also be boosted by preventing the fleeing refugees of any men ages 18 to 60. He also reiterated the Ukrainian resolve to defend itself and stated that he nor any other government official would never leave the capital of Kiev, in spite of any Russian attack there. Friday also saw massive armies of Russian tanks pushing even deeper into Ukraine, and even Special Forces Russian Spasnets troops dropping from helicopters to take the Hotsmo airfield near Kiev, the capital. Other very notable events that happened on Friday include the tally of refugees fleeing Ukraine reaching 5 million, Ukraine receiving the first war support from external countries since the war began in the form of ammunition from Poland. Also, NATO, for the first time ever, activated their response force, which is meant to deter or even engage in any combat to defend NATO members or close NATO allies. NATO explicitly said that they are not intending, as of now, to become involved. This is just in case of any eventuality, in case NATO does have to get involved. This map shows the situation on the ground in Ukraine as of the latest information. To the east, the color red shows the territory of Russia. To the north, the red shows Russia's close ally Belarus, and towards the middle, the red shows Russia's close ally Transnistria. The orange shows areas of Ukraine that have been occupied by the Russian military over the past decade. This includes Donetsk and Luhansk along Russia's border and Crimea in the south. The yellow shows the territory Russia has moved into with their military as of the evening of February 25th on Friday, and the purple dot shows the airport that large amounts of Russian special forces have landed in. Over the past 48 hours, many peace rallies have been held all over Europe and even in some parts of the United States and other parts around the world. This has been responded to from governments around the world by withdrawing many sports events that have been scheduled for happening in Russia. Also, the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, has met with the Russian ambassador and unilaterally condemned the attack. All major airline flights that usually fly through Russia and Ukraine have all been rerouted to avoid these territories, and Europe has declared energy independence from Russia and rapidly increased their shipping of oil and natural gas from the Middle East and the United States to compensate for this. Although the United States is continuing to respond, many in the United States question the speed and effectiveness to which the sanctions are being enacted and want the U.S. government to put a lot more pressure on countries like Turkey, China, and India who are enabling this Russian aggression. Something very interesting, though, about this situation that is very important to keep in mind is Russian behavior during this invasion. It's interesting to note that they're not employing most of their military, or even half their military, in this enterprise. Most of it is sitting in peaceful deployment in other parts of Russia or Asia. They also have not employed their vast capabilities in cyber warfare, in hacking, in lots of espionage, or other special forces warfare. They're really dialing back the intensity to which they're attacking Ukraine, most likely in order to avoid the wrath of the United States, as the one thing that no one in the world wants is a major war between Russia and the United States. This is why I don't really think that this conflict, as it's going right now, could result in something looking like World War III, because no one wants nuclear war. That would not benefit anyone, and everyone realizes how catastrophic that would be. Now, the way this conflict could go is indirect support for both sides, the way the Cold War went, when the US invaded Vietnam and the Soviet Union offered a lot of backing, or when the United States, China, and the Soviet Union fought each other indirectly in Korea. For now, the Ukrainian military has realized they can't hold back the massive advances of Russian tank columns and are pulling back the major forces of their military into the cities, where they can use the large buildings as fortresses so that they can fight the Russians close in and really take away the advantage of the superior Russian tanks and technology. As we come to the end of the first 48 hours of the war, the Russian tank advances are slowing for the night, and they are intensifying their artillery strikes on the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. The bombing in Ukrainian cities across the country is just as intense as it was. Our prayers are with you, Ukraine, and civilians of Eastern Europe, and we hope for the best for you. To your viewers on YouTube, please comment, like, and subscribe so I can share more information like this as the war continues.